loans and how to stay out of financial trouble. So welcome. I'm glad you are here with me. I'll just make sure everybody's in before we get started. I'll get Priya to give me a sign verbally that everybody's in the waiting room.
Yep, Tracy, so I think we'll give it another 30 seconds or so.
Perfect.
And then we can start.
Great. Wonderful. So let's get. My name is Tracey Bissett, and I am the President and Chief Financial Fitness Trainer at Bissett Financial Fitness, and for other funding sources from lines of credit to and how to stay out of financial trouble. And so important that we think about what does the financial hold. Absolutely, there's so many that are happening. We need to think what's going on in the economy, what's going on in the world of work, what's happening with interest rates, what of COVID supports you're a domestic student or an international, what's available for you. And so there's quite a lot of uncertainty, and that your financial future is a little bit uncertain as well. And so I'm so glad you're here in session with me today so that we can talk about some things that will organize different elements of your life and do some research and get you thinking about what it is that you want to accomplish, whether you're going into school, whether you're out of school, whether you're in the middle, no matter what, is help you. And so today we're going to be talking about all kinds of things. We're going to talk about how your financial future starts with you, and really how we are going to be able to understand a little bit more about ourselves, our money mindset, and certainly how we want to proceed when we're taking action. Get into non-government borrowed and talk about what those institutions are looking like, what are the options, and what are they going to need when you actually apply. We're going to talk about financial keys to success and certainly some pitfalls I want you to avoid, that you can really accomplish all your goals and live the lifestyle that you really want to live. And so a little bit about me. My background is in financial services. I worked at TD Bank for 7 years in the areas of commercial and risk management. I also did a lot with them related to financial literacy, lots of volunteer efforts, whether through Junior Achievement, Girl Guides of Canada, or other. When I left the bank, I really started Bissett Financial Fitness to be able to educate and empower young adults and entrepreneurs to take control of and live their financial confidence. So I have lots of education. I've got a Bachelor of Commerce from Queen's University in Kingston, an MBA from Dalhousie in Halifax, Nova Scotia, and I am a CFA charter holder. So I've spent a lot of time in schools, exactly what you're going to do. And on the flip side, I'm also a professor at Centennial Business School. I was an entrepreneur in my youth, so that really led me to want to focus on certainly being involved in business and helping people in business. It's always been something I've been very interested in. I am the host of the Young Money podcast with Tracey Bissett. It is the advice show for young millionaires in the making. I would love for you all to check it out and to subscribe. We put out a new episode every single week. We've been going strong since December 2017. Over 200 episodes this week. We just issued episode 216, and you're going to find things that are about money. Some are going to seem like, how does she make it fit? I've done lots of Super Bowl episodes related to the musical talents and what we can learn from them as it pertains to financial fitness, things around career, things around understanding your benefits, and lots of special episodes for students. So you can see on the screen, I've got 3 episodes featured here. We've been very fortunate to be able to have a chat with Marie Baker, who has a book, The Debt-Free Graduate. That's a great episode to check out. Suzanne Tyson has been on the show many, many times, I think 3 times. And she talks about how to fund your education with loyalty points, as well as different ways to pay for school, as another episode. And some of you may know Shelley Clayton, that third picture on the right there. How to access increasing your access to post-secondary education. And she is working at the University of New Brunswick in the financial aid office and really helps students get access many sources as possible. So I hope you will check out the podcast. It's a great resource. It helps you think about things that may not be on your radar and gives you some great tips and advice. And it's really unbiased, credible advice so that you can learn and get going on your fitness journey. The other thing to know about me is I'm an active volunteer. This is my dog Rosie on the screen, and she and I volunteer through Therapeutic Paws of Canada. So we're looking forward to, as restrictions lift, getting back to doing that in person. And so you're here today. I commend you and applaud you for being here. You absolutely are focused on your futures and making sure that you are set up for success. But I know that there's a lot of stress that goes with that. As I said, some of you may be getting ready to go. Some of you may be family members of people getting ready to go. You might be in school. You've already got some student debt, or you're coming out and now you're thinking about the job market. So on average, the average student debt when students graduate from post-secondary, $25,000 in student loans and about $3,000 in credit card debt. To give you an indication of what's happening with other people. And depending on their experience growing up, young adults' perception of credit varies, with 33% viewing credit cards as additional spending money, not actually something you've got to pay back. And so that's going to be one of the things we talk about today, understanding credit and how it works. And I'm not sure if you knew, but with the current levels of student debt, it results in graduates being delayed in getting into other milestones in their life, like traveling or buying a home, maybe getting a vehicle, maybe going back to school, all things like that. I was super fortunate growing up. My family talked about money, and so I had a very good understanding of it as I went through my post-secondary experience. And if that's not your situation, it's so wonderful that you're here today. And you're definitely in the right place if you're interested in increasing your financial fitness so you can be successful in certainly managing that journey. Now, I've mentioned the term financial fitness a couple times already. And for me, what it means is you're going to be as knowledgeable as you can be. Everyone is going to start where they are. Financial fitness, I view it really as a spectrum where we could be, just like if we think akin to physical fitness, we might be taking that first walk around the block. We're going to get off the couch and start doing some exercise. We may take that first stroll around the block, or we might be more advanced and actually be training for a marathon. The same thing applies when we're talking about financial fitness. Maybe you're just starting to learn about different kinds of bank accounts, different types of funding sources for school, or you might actually be fairly knowledgeable and you're learning how to become a more sophisticated investor. Wherever you are starting is the right place for you. Know that you're on a financial fitness journey for your lifetime. You're going to make missteps, and that's okay. As long as you get back on track and on the path and keep moving ahead. Do something every day where you can take one small imperfect action to really move yourself forward, which is key. And so it all starts with you. I mentioned this before that we were going to cover this, and it's really important that you think about, what are your views about money? Views form very, very young. So I once had a 5-year-old in the Sparks Girl Guide program tell me that money was evil. Imagine what must be going on in her mind if she thinks at 5 years old that money's evil. I bet that she didn't really understand what money was, but her views that are going to shape the rest of her life start at that time. So I think it's really important to think about, what was your upbringing? Did your family talk about money? Was it a taboo subject? Still, people are not as comfortable talking about money. A lot of people still continue to feel that it might be airing dirty laundry or sharing things that you shouldn't be sharing if you speak about financial difficulties. And so I want you to think about what has been your experience. And I know that when you have a conversation with someone, it opens it up so that it becomes a really safe place to have that dialogue. So it's important to think about, what is your mindset, to think about your goals, and so very important, the element of communication. And so if you're a student here, make sure you're going back and you're having a dialogue with your parents. If your family's here, that's great. You can all take it in together and have a conversation later. But being open and honest about, what is it you need? What can people help with? What are going to be the gaps? That's super important. And so you've got to start there. What do you want? What is it that you want to study at school? What are your interests? What are you good at? Then doing the numbers and figuring out how it works. So I want to touch a little bit on money mindset, and we're just going to go at a very surface level on it, but just to get you thinking about the concept. So imagine the little girl who said money is evil. she has what we call a scarcity mindset, this belief that there's never going to be enough. There's probably been yelling or crying or door slamming or being told, no, we don't have any money for that. Those kinds of things going on in her household. She may feel jealous of others. And certainly those are the kinds of things that come as we get older and we internalize those things that happened when we were young. And so if you think about your life, do you get a pit in your stomach every time you get a bill? You feel like if someone else is successful, that maybe you can't be because there's only so much to go around. Okay. When you see these pictures on the screen, I want you to think about the one with the palm trees. Do you think about, wow, I can't wait to go on a vacation like that someday, and I know when I save up my money that I'm going to be able to do that? Or do you think, I'm never going to be able to afford to do that, never going on that vacation? And that starts to give you some clues about what you're thinking. If your car broke down or something unexpected happened and you had to outlay money that you weren't actually planning, do you say, yes, I have an emergency fund, an emergency fund there for when you need things? And so I would say yes. Lots of issues with my dog this year. She's needed a lot of different procedures and surgeries. And so it's been quite a lot of unexpected expenses. But yes, I know that I can afford it. I also have insurance for her, but it's all about how you're approaching problems and thinking about it. And so when you think about the abundance side of the spectrum, because scarcity is over here, abundance is over here, you might think, I have enough. I can handle this. Those feelings of jealousy are going to disappear. You're going to replace them with things like gratitude, which is super important. So I want you to think a little bit about that. 3 ways that we can move ourselves a little bit further to the abundance side of the spectrum. Practice gratitude. So appreciate the things you have going on in your life. I know that you have internet access. You've showed up today. You must have some kind of device where you're able to do that. Had a great sleep, you had some food to eat, you were able to have a shower today, have clean clothes to wear. Start with all of those positives. And as you practice gratitude, you're going to feel more abundant. Spend time with people who make you feel good. And I don't mean who are just complimenting you, but who are expanding your horizons, who want the same kinds of things as you, who have similar goals and make you feel positive. You get to control who you spend your time with. And the third one is leave some space in your schedule. Don't be overscheduled so that you can have some downtime, some time to reflect. And then the third one I want to talk about certainly is about communication, about having those honest, open communications with your family. I mentioned it back here, and we've got the picture of the family up on the right. Certainly, it's tempting as a young adult to be thinking that my family is going to be taking care of everything on their own, but we need to actually think about what is it that we want to do? Are we planning to go away to school? Are we going to be staying at home? Thinking about all the things we might need to put into a budget. And I guarantee you want to be thorough with that. Often people forget the things that are going into the budget. So I've come up with some tactics to help you have those conversations with families. And if any parents, grandparents, other family members are listening, these are things that you can actually relate to them as well. So think the student and the young adult should be thinking through their request fully. When they want to talk to their family members, they should actually schedule a time. It's not something you throw at them when they walk through the door, coming home from an event or work or something. You want to have that time set out, carved out, where everyone's in the right mind space to talk about the financial things. And then go through, what is it that you're looking for? Are they able to support? Figure out what's going to be a mutually agreeable solution. You might be thinking that they have all kinds of savings that's going to be able to pay for your education, and that may very well not be the case. So you need to have that communication, and it does start with you. So be very respectful of that and be thinking of that. So now I want to get into some non-government borrowed funds. And for those who might be thinking, why did she tell us all that stuff at the beginning? Being financially fit, it's about our minds and our actions as much as the knowledge we have and being in the right mindset. Now, some of the other sessions you'll be able to see, you're going to be learning about potentially government sources. You're going to learn potentially around higher ed points, how you can use your loyalty points to pay for school. But certainly we want to think about what are the other kinds of things that we can do. What's possible? Student lines of credit, where we can draw on the funds when we need them and repay them as we have surplus funds. Personal loans, overdraft protection, which gets linked to your bank account, perhaps a student credit card. And so I mentioned off the top, students are averaging $3,000 in student credit card debt as they graduate post-secondary. And many of them, when they were taking on that credit card, weren't necessarily thinking that I had to repay it. Okay, so think about that. All of these, and car loans, not to diminish those. Some of you may be living at home, but you're commuting to school and you're going to be using a car to get there. So all of these things, the thing they have in common is that they are credit products. So the financial institution has a list of requirements that you need to meet in order to be able to qualify for each of these. There'll be certain limits. Sometimes the limits depend on the type of program that you're going to be in. To give you a little bit more information about information they're going to be looking for so you can be prepared, they're going to want your current and previous addresses. They're going to want to see a budget, which has all of the money that's going to be coming in. So money from jobs, maybe savings. They'll also look for your annual income. If you're going to be paying a mortgage or a rent amount, they're going to want to know all of the payments you have to pay monthly and all of the household costs. Not only that, they're going to be looking for proof of enrollment of where you're going to school. They'll be looking for identification. And in some cases, depending on the amount you're going to borrow, they might want one of your family members to sign with you. Okay. And I want to give a little bit of a caveat here on the co-signing, which is super important to make sure that we're thinking about this the right way. I mentioned earlier that I'm a professor at Centennial College, and certainly I have heard in my class, either before or after class started, one student asking another student, hey, would you mind co-signing for my car loan with me? Okay, I can't get it approved. They said I need someone to sign with me. And I've heard that conversation. Then I've also seen the aftermath where girl signs with boy, they're in a romantic relationship, they're completely in love, and now all of a sudden they're broken up. The boy has not continued to pay for the car, and the bank is now looking at her, asking her to make those payments. It's important that you understand that a co-signer means that you are accessing the credit as well if someone doesn't make the payments. So if it's your family member, it's a friend, or if you were in the instance where someone wanted you to be this person, if the person who first gets the money can't pay, they're coming to you. So very important that you understand that and you don't take on that responsibility lightly. It's very, very critical to be aware of that. There are other ways you can help. If friends are asking you or family members are asking you to co-sign, help them make a budget. Maybe you can encourage them, instead of getting a new car, to get a used car. Maybe they can take transit. You can help them in other ways without co-signing for that loan. So important to keep that in mind. So as you have questions, please drop them in the Q&A, and Preya will help me out with that, or we'll answer them at the end. So I don't want you to lose your thought if you have questions about credit. I know there was one question that was in the chat before we started, and it was around, will these sources be available to international students? It's going to be dependent on the policy of the different financial institutions. So you would need to check those out and check out some of the organizations in Canada. Our big five banks, Bank of Montreal, Scotiabank, TD Bank, CIBC, and Royal Bank of Canada, RBC. There's National Bank. There are also lots of credit unions, depending on which province you're going to go to school in. And so they all have different lending policies, and so you're going to want to check them out. Okay, so that was one question I know that was in the chat. The other question I had, which I'm going to leave to tackle in a minute, but should you take out loans to buy stocks? Okay, so we're going to get into that because I certainly have some thoughts on that. So thinking about all of this information that you need, these are probably top-up sources when we look at what's available here. If you're qualified for government funds, you certainly want to get those government funds. If you can use loyalty points through higher ed points to be able to pay for some school, this should be really where you're going last, and you're filling the gap in any kind of funding shortfall. And certainly for any family members listening, parents with younger children who haven't yet to post-secondary, establish a registered education savings plan so that as you contribute funds, the government's going to contribute as well. If you start it when your children are very young, it's going to be able to grow through the beauty of compound interest over time. Okay, so good to think about. Now I want to get into financial keys for success. So these are important things that are really relevant for all of you. So one, set a reasonable and realistic budget. I just showed you with the sources of information that the financial institution is going to look for. They're looking for a budget. So a budget very simply is, what is all the money that I have or is coming in? What are all the bills I need to pay and what's left? And so normally we might make a budget for school for the whole year. You can do it annually or for their 8-month period, but it's good to also break it out by month, because sometimes in certain months, like September, we would have to pay a lot of funds in advance for things that we're going to use later. We might have to make many book purchases in the month of September. And so when you're making your budget, very key that you want to absolutely focus on every single thing that you're going to need to spend money on. Sometimes I hear stories of families who've made a budget and now we're into October, school year started in September, and there's not enough money left. And that's because the budget wasn't comprehensive. So in that moment, though, families looking at the students saying, I don't know what happened. And it's because our budget wasn't complete. So there are lots of information sources out there to help you detail all of that. And certainly that would be a great source for you to do that really realistically. So have an open, honest dialogue with your family, like I talked about. Number 2, you want to incur as little debt as possible and actively make a plan to pay down the debt when you get out of school. So if we can work part-time, if we can get scholarships, if we can get bursaries, whether from high school or from the institution we're going to, or from third parties. At Bissett Financial Fitness annually, we have a scholarship fund. We will be opening applications up again next year in the spring, but that's a source of a scholarship. So find as much money as you can from sources where you don't need to pay it back, okay? Because when you get out of school, you're going to be making your very first salary. It's not going to go as far as you expect, and you want to be able to move on to other things in your life and accomplish other goals that you have without being straddled with so much debt. So if you don't want to take on a lot, I said to work part-time, maybe you go to school part-time, maybe you live at home. May not be as enjoyable as your experience when you went to school, but it's really going to allow you to reduce the debt because the cost difference is quite significant. Think about future you. This is the first goal that you have right now of what you want to study, what you're going to accomplish, and what type of job you might like. What are going to be the other things that you want in your life? Have you enjoyed traveling in the past and you want to do it more in your future, or you haven't been able to do it up until now, and when you graduate, you want to be able to go on some trips? Do you want to be able to get that first car? Maybe it's thinking about your first home. Maybe it's going back to do a second degree, a master's. Maybe it's a PhD. Think about what you want to do in your life, because that can help guide you in terms of how much debt you may want to take on at this stage and really how much time you want to do it. And if you have a lot of goals in your life, you want to be able to come out of school with as little debt as possible. Number 4, very important. So oftentimes on campus, there's going to be credit card companies, or they're going to solicit you where you can get that very first student credit card, or if you are applying for financing, they may offer it to you as well. When you are granted credit, an account is opened with Equifax and TransUnion. These are our credit rating bureaus in Canada, and it monitors how you use your product, whether it be a credit card, whether it be a line of credit, an overdraft, even can be some utility bills. So it measures, do you make your payments on time? Do you usually make them late? Do you miss them? Are you skipping them? All kinds of things. If you've have some dispute with an organization and you haven't paid your bill, they might lodge a complaint against you, and that could be lodged there. You want to make sure that you protect your credit reputation. And if you think about it, it's really like your financial reputation. You have your reputation in the world and how you like to be perceived and the way you present yourself. This is how you show up financially. So anytime you are taking on credit, you want to make sure you understand how you're supposed to use it, what it's for, and what the expectations are of you, especially when it comes to repayment. Like I mentioned off the top, 33% of post-secondary students didn't realize that you had to pay back the money on your credit card, that it wasn't just free cash that you could use to spend at the cafeteria or at the bookstore or what have you. Okay, so super important. 5, get a student bank account. They're going to have lower fees, and you want to make sure that you control how much you're spending on fees, and they're geared for students. So all the major institutions have them, so that should be no issue to get them. And you want to think about how many transactions are going to be going on and make sure you're covered in your account. Very, very important. Sometimes young adults don't ask questions because they feel like they don't have enough information to even know what to ask. Ask any question that you have. Even if you don't know where to start, you could ask, say you're here with me today. When we get in the Q&A, you may say, you know what, Tracey, I don't even know what questions to start with. And so I give you a prompt or a sample, something like, if you were in my shoes and you were going to school, what do you wish that I knew? What pitfalls do you wish that you would have known when you were going to school? So you can phrase them in such a way that doesn't require you to have so much information up front, and do your due diligence. If you're going to take out a credit product, make sure you read the contract, make sure you understand what's happening. If you're getting a car loan, what does that look like? Where you're going to be going to school, have you really researched it? You could be in the phase right now, you're kind of planning of what you want to do. Think about everything that's important to you, and don't just rely on keeping it up in your head. Write it down, okay? Whether it's on, I did a motion like with a pen, but you're probably typing it in your phone, but you've got a list somewhere so that you can make sure that you keep your questions top of mind, or really around, these are the things that I like to do, or I am very successful when these are the conditions that I'm working under or studying under. Make sure you know that that environment's going to be conducive to that. And the very last one, which is absolutely critical, is to communicate, which you've already heard me talk about when it was with your family, and make sure that you ask for help. Okay. Very important. Everyone wants to help you navigate things financially, get to the right place so that you can learn what you want to learn. All of the institutions, the schools, educational institutions, they all have so many departments who want to assist you. I know as a professor, I continue to make my students aware about career services and the counseling services, the learning center where you can get tutoring, how to get to financial aid if you're running short on funds and you don't have money for groceries. So there is a spirit and a community for all young adults to want to support them. All you need to do is ask. So that's really important that you make that a priority. Now, some financial pitfalls I want you to avoid. Whether you're in school, you're on your way to graduation, or you're a new grad, or you're starting to think about all this stuff because you're going to be going to school shortly. And it's a good reminder for families as well who may be joining us. We certainly don't want to spend more than we earn. We want to make sure that whatever our paycheck is going to be, that we actually are saving some of that. And that we factor in what's going to be our student debt payment if we do have loans when we come out of school. Very quickly, things can escalate when you come out of school and you get a job and you think your money is going to stretch really, really far. Things are very expensive. So by having that budget, you're already going to know how much things will be, but then you want to make sure you contain yourself to spending less than you're making, okay? Payday loans. You've probably seen Money Mart and other signs around where you can go in and get an advance on your payday. And as far as I'm concerned, this is really where you go, and this is a kind of a last resort option. The interest rate on them is incredibly high. Yes, you do get an advance on your paycheck, which sounds like a fantastic thing, but now when you pay it back, you're going to be paying back a lot in interest, and it gets into this vicious cycle where you can't really get out of it. Okay, so if you can avoid that, very important. Credit cards, unless there's an emergency, I think it's good to have one and start the clock on your credit score, but I don't think you should be regularly using it unless you have the funds to pay it down. Okay, so if you're going to use it to buy a textbook and you have your money in your account that was allocated for your school expenses, as soon as you make that purchase, make that payment on the credit card immediately. Okay, that way you're not going to spend the money and have that balance sit on your credit card. We've already talked about co-signing for a friend or a partner. If I can't get the car loan and I ask my friend to do it for me, my friend would be on the hook if I don't make the payments. Next one, getting a car too soon. This is a really big one, and I know how much nicer it is to go in a car than potentially transit, to get around, to get to campus, get to your job, all of those kinds of things. Sometimes where you live, it's really just a necessity in life. I grew up in Nova Scotia, and so transit is not as robust as it is here in Toronto. It's just a different place. And so maybe you do need to get a car. But when you get a car, you need to think about it's not just the cost of the car, it's the insurance, it's the gas, it's the maintenance, it's repair. You should get into an accident. All of those things cost money. And so it's not just about what that payment's going to be. So something to think about. And the final one I want you to consider is doing nothing. So I talked about this financial fitness concept of how we need to take steps every day to increase our knowledge, learn more, figure out things we don't know. And there's absolutely never been a better time for you to learn about personal finance and to be able to get free access to information. There are unlimited number of podcasts out there that can help you. And sometimes people will say to me, well, you have your podcast, Tracey, Young Money with Tracey Bissett. Doesn't it bother you when more and more financial podcasts pop up? Absolutely not. The more, the merrier. My style may not be the style that everybody learns from. And my goal is to create a world where everyone is more financially educated. And that specifically includes young adults and it includes business owners. So find somebody that speaks in a way that you understand. There's so many books, there's YouTube videos, live streams. There is no shortage of information if you look. And if you head to my booth, you'll be able to download, number one, a list of top 25 resources to help you pay for school. And there's direct links in that document. I've also put together for you, because there's also so many podcasts and books out there. I want to help you get to the right ones. There's a list of podcasts and books that will help you with your financial fitness. So all you need to do is head to my exhibitor booth and you'll be able to grab those links. And if I can add them to the chat, I will before we go today. So doing nothing is not an option. I appreciate that our school system in Canada, certainly, and if you're coming internationally, you may not have learned in high school or junior high. And so that's the situation. You might have got a little bit of education, but not really what you need. And so the onus now is on you. I don't want you necessarily looking to your family. They may be able to help you, but probably nobody taught them as well. So why don't you learn together and take some forward action immediately? First step you can do, if you download my podcast, you're going to get something new in your podcast player every week that's absolutely free that will help you advance your knowledge. Okay. And this week on the show, we had a licensed insolvency trustee who talks about what do you do if you have too much debt. Pretty interesting episode. And I hope that doesn't happen to you. But if it should happen to you, that's something that you'll need to know. The week before, we had a really great session. We had military intelligence trained officer who was helping us read body language and understand how to assess when people are talking to us and what people's motivations are, so that if we're in a job interview situation, we can read people a little bit easier. We could also see if people are trying to manipulate us, so that we can, if it's job focused, increase our earnings power. Because I'm about everything related to money for your age group. So do check that out, but please don't choose the option of doing nothing. That's really not going to serve you well. Okay. So I'm going to take questions now. I'm going to stop my slides. Like I mentioned, though, the top 25 resources to help pay for school, you can download that at my booth, as well as the podcast and literary resource list. And take this off, stop sharing. So come over here and I will be able to see you guys. All right. So a couple questions I had from the beginning I want to get to first, and then I'm going to go down here and answer some other ones. Okay. So one question was, is it a good idea to take out a loan and buy stocks? Okay. So we want to think about this question. So when you're thinking about your funds and you've created your budget, you're going to know how much you need of your funds to go to certain things. When you're thinking about then how might you invest your funds, I want you to think about not only your goals, your risk tolerance. So how much do you need those funds? So if it's to pay for your groceries next week, you have zero risk tolerance, or a very limited risk tolerance, because you can afford to lose that money. So you need to make sure that you have your food for your groceries or your rent or whatever it may be. If you have more funds than you need to cover all your bills, you probably have a larger risk tolerance and you can take some more risk. you also think about your time horizon. When do I need the money? Which ties into what I was saying. So if you need the funds that you have in your possession to actually pay for expenses that are coming up, I do not think it's a good idea to take out a loan to buy stocks or bonds or anything, okay? Or Bitcoin or any other kind of cryptocurrency or non-fungible tokens or NFTs. So you need to be investing your funds in something where you can get it out at the time you need it and be able to pay your bills on time and your obligations. With any kind of stocks, there's going to be risk and you could actually lose all of your money. And so I don't want it to sound like doom and gloom, but you need to be very knowledgeable about what is the risk, what do you need those funds for, and by having your budget and understanding your financial situation, you have a couple $100 to play around with, and maybe you do decide to buy some stocks or whatever you want to do, and understanding that there may be risk and you may not have those funds. One really great option I heard actually from a guest on my podcast who was a really successful recipient of getting a lot of scholarships. When she received her student loan money, she put it in a tax-free savings account so that it was safe and secure. She had it in a just in the account, not actually invested in something risky. So she was earning more interest, and then she could draw the money when she needed, but it was actually working for her, but the money wasn't at risk. So that's kind of a good option to think about. Okay. Perfect. All right. Let's see. All right, so Gaynell, we talked about yours. Financial institutions, you need to check their policies. The greatest tip, this is for greatest tip you have to give graduating students this year, minimize how much debt you can take or you have taken, and then figure out how aggressively you can pay it off. So really be focused on that. And if you do have funds from the Canadian government, so you've got Canadian government loan funds, you want to make sure that you don't quickly pay it off with a financial institution source, because you're going to lose your rights and remedies that come from the Canada Student Loan Program or the provincial one. So make sure you understand what is happening. Sometimes when student jobs coming out, they want to pay that off with kind of maybe a bigger loan at a bank. You lose some of the protections. So say you were to lose your job in 6 months' time, you'd have the ability to have some flexibility on your payments through the government program, but not with the bank. So think about that. So create a really good debt reduction program. All right. So if English is my first language in my country, do I need to provide any proof of English again? I think this is probably not for this session, because I can't speak to what the educational institutions are looking for. So you'll need to check with the institution and then verify that. Okay. Okay, so what Crystal's saying is they're going to be recording. Yes, there's going to be recordings, and the session will, organizers will relay information later to you on how you can access all those recordings. Okay, thank you, Jamie, greeting me from El Salvador. Excellent. Okay, perfect. Is it doable to graduate post-secondary without Perfect, thank you. Without any credit or any loan debt, I'll have some financial funds from Children's Aid Society. It is doable, but creating a budget, you will need to see how much at a minimum you'll be able to, or you'll need to have to be able to complete that. I think that could possibly look like if you can live with your family, so that you're not incurring any additional kind of residence, meals, fees like that. If you can work part-time and have some kind of employment, and you can actually get jobs at school. I would encourage everyone to apply for student awards when they know what school they're going to, because if they're recipients, it also makes them, I think, higher eligibility for on-campus employment. I know many of my students work as tutors, but if you could have a job that maybe you can ramp up hours in the summer and then during the school year work part-time, that would be great. I think it's doable, but you're probably going to have to be very flexible in terms of how you make that work. And it might mean, in order to stay away from any credit or debt, to go part-time. So it's really going to depend on how much is your tuition and the other expenses, and then how are the funds going to come in to pay for that. Okay, I hope that answers that, Malia. Okay. April, do you have funding recommendations for mature students who've already put their own children through post-secondary, need funding, but might not qualify for student loans? So if you happen to have a registered retirement savings plan, you are eligible to withdraw funds. I forget the limit off the top of my head, but through the lifelong learning program, where you can withdraw the funds to pay for school, and then you need to pay it back over a prescribed period of time, probably around 10 years, but don't quote me on that. You'll want to look at the Canada Revenue Agency website for that, but that's a way to get funds. If you are working, you can ask your employer as well. Sometimes they make contributions to help their employees actually get through school. And so they might have a program where they can approve it and then reimburse. They might contribute to a portion. So that could help as well. Those would be two things off the top of my head. And if you own your own home, potentially you'd be eligible to get a mortgage backed, like a line of credit secured by your house, which could help. So those would be some things that you would consider. Okay. So Heritage, how do you cope properly with being a bright international student, tuition fees with partial scholarships? So a lot of what I've said already will apply. You want to look to see if you can get a job part-time. Certainly one not that's going to jeopardize your ability to focus on school, because that's the primary thing that you're doing. See where you can live, where maybe you can pay a little bit less. So maybe not residents, maybe you and some fellow students could get a cheaper apartment or something like that to live together, and just being creative, but doing that budget up front so that you know how much money it's going to cost, and then where are different sources you can get the funds. Also, once you arrive at your school, see if there's other scholarships that you can apply for that might not be contingent on the school, that might be broader. And Scholarships Canada certainly has lots of scholarships on their site that you could check out. Okay. Jenna, in your opinion, is it better to put all my savings towards my tuition and go into credit card debt, or set some of my savings aside for extra expenses and apply for student loans to cover tuition? I think that you should limit your use of credit cards, because the interest rate is very high. And so if you apply for student loans, the interest rate, like while you're in school, you're not paying any interest, depending on the type of loan. And also once you graduate, the interest rate is going to be so much lower than a credit card, and you are going to have to carry some debt. What I would be careful about, though, is making sure that you put your savings away. And so it's not that you're using all the student loan and you're using your savings and just living a more lavish lifestyle because you have extra funds. I want to make sure that you don't get into trouble. So it's good to have some savings, put them out of reach, so that you do have, if something emergency comes up or something unexpected, but you will have a lower interest rate on the student debt than you would on a student credit card. Okay. All right. Tips for paying back student loans, student lines of credit. It starts with creating that budget, knowing how much income is going to come in. First jobs, depending on what field you're in, they're going to have different entry levels. You're going to need to know your take-home pay. So actually what you take home, not what your salary is. You're going to, if you've signed up for benefits with the organization, you're going to account for those as well. See how much money you have left at the end of the month. Figure out all the expenses that need to get paid, and then what is available for debt repayment. It would be good to do that. Say you were living at home while you were going to school, or you were living with a bunch of roommates. Before you move out and make a different accommodation arrangement, you should do this budget, because maybe it's not your preference to continue living with family or with others during that time. You'd be able to have more funds available because you'd have accommodation payment to make that, so you could actually pay down that debt a little bit faster. If you can take on a second job while you're working full time, as long as it's okay with your employer, I would do anything that you can to pay down the debt as quickly as possible, so you can move on to those other life milestones. The other thing that's important to mention that I didn't realize myself till a couple of years ago is, as you're graduating, you can apply for scholarships or be eligible for scholarships on the back end when you're coming out. So make sure you are getting information about that and you're actually looking into it, so that you can potentially get some free money to pay for that, as well as when you start with an employer, ask them if they have any programs to help you pay down your debt. Okay. Certainly through higher ed points, I've heard that some employers are supporting their employees. These are more smaller businesses, but they're actually using their loyalty points to help their employees. So the important point from all of this is that you should be curious and ask questions, and never be afraid to ask. Do you have someone who can help me? You're graduating, you talk to the school. What is available to me? And really be open to any possible option. And as quick as you can pay down that student debt, the better. Not at the expense of not having any kind of life where you have to rush home from work and just stay home because you don't have any extra funds, but really being mindful of what does the future you want to have and be, and that this is one part of your journey and that you're going to carry on, and there's going to be other things that you want to accomplish. Okay. Let's see here. So resources online to help plan out budgets. Great resource on Canada government site. It's the Financial Consumer Agency of Canada. So FCAC, they actually have an online budgeting tool. That's a great one. Higher ed points as well. They have on their site a budgeting template. Is a really good one. Okay. Some financial books that I would recommend. So a really great one for people learning, and it's Canadian as well, is Young, Fun, and Financially Free, written by Leanna Hawkins. She was originally based in Vancouver. She's in New York now, but that's a really good primer. You can read it very quickly in a couple of hours. She's also a good person to follow on social media. Any books out there by Kelly Keene. So Kelly is Kelley, and Keene is Keehn. She has some great books. For those looking to do something around investing, Erin Lowry is a great author, and I can't for the life of me think of the names of her books. But if you go to my exhibitor booth, I have a list of podcasts I think would be good for you, shows, as well as a list of books. But that Young, Fun, and Financially Free is a really good starter one, and it is about living in Canada. So that will be relevant for all of you. Okay. Where can I find your booth? In the exhibitor booths. I know when I looked on the app, I was able to click up at something on the top of my app and find all the exhibitor. They're going to look for Bissett Financial Fitness. Okay. Okay, so Ida says, I'm in high school right now. I'm going to be applying to schools. Soon, can I save money and avoid a lot of debt by staying at home for university? Absolutely. That's a great thing to do. I remember my first year in university, and this was many years ago, it was $15,000 to stay in residence. And I was a domestic student. My brother always stayed at home. He didn't have any student debt, and I did from going away. And so it's the other thing you want to consider is when I graduate and I get a job in my chosen field, how much money am I reasonably going to make? And so you can just Google, how much does a graphic designer make living in Toronto? Okay, so search for what you're planning to be and see what the average starting salary is going to be. And that's what you should be using in your budget. Because if the profession that you're going to go on to do is the starting salary is very low and it doesn't increase very quickly thereafter, that will help you gauge how much debt you might want to take on. And so that could help form in your decision. Okay. Okay. When do we need to pay student loan? After finishing studies or during? And that's from Anonymous. So typically for any kind of government program, and I don't know all the mechanics of all the programs, there's typically an interest-only period after you finish school. So there's going to be some time where you only pay interest and then principal payments will kick in. It's going to be kind of a similar thing with bank funds as well. So you need to understand that when you're actually signing up and taking those funds. But there's typically, I'm trying to remember credit. I think you might have to pay. I think there's a moratorium on interest while I was studying, but then interest started immediately after. So don't sign any agreement, don't accept any funds unless you understand the terms and conditions, because you want to make sure you stay in compliance. Okay. Jagdeep says, is it a good idea to take a year off and work to earn money? It is a good idea if that works best for you, your family, your situation. Okay. Sometimes people do it to earn money. Sometimes people do it because they're trying to figure out what is it that I want to do. And there's an entity out there, if you an organization that helps and actually provides programming for students who are doing a gap year. I think it's called gap year, or the gap year, something related to that if you search it, because that could help you keep staying on track and stay motivated for when you're going to go to school, and that still is the plan. But if that's what works best for you, to my earlier points around, let's try to get as little debt as possible, and you might be still figuring out what you want to do. Some people don't want to go to school online part of the time or any of the time, so it's going to be a very personal decision. But if that's what feels right to you, that's what you should do. Okay, and certainly communicate with your family. Okay. Useful tips to budget. So some of the ones that people forget, if you've grown accustomed to Ubering from location to location, if you are used to ordering up Uber Eats or other kind of food delivery services, those are in the budget. If you've got an expensive cell phone, you certainly want to make sure that is in the budget. And it's pretty hard these days to have a cell phone that isn't expensive, and to have data that you need to, you'll have a higher monthly thing. So think about everything you do in the course of your day, your week, your month. Do you have the costs in there for all of that stuff? If you're going to be living in an apartment, does it have laundry service, or do you have to go to the laundromat and put money in the machine? That needs to be in your budget. Your groceries, how much are you reasonably going to eat? Okay. I talked about trying to put off getting a car as long as you can. Sometimes if you have the car, your fellow students will want you to be driving them places. And so you should be making arrangements. Hey, can you give me some gas money, please? Because I keep paying all these costs. So a good way is to kind of track your movements for a couple weeks. Think about all the things you're going to have to spend money on and make sure they're all in the budget. Even I've done an episode on this as well on Young Money around cohabitating with other people. I use Kleenex, okay? So Kleenex like this to blow my nose. Other people are just as comfortable using toilet paper. And so when you live with others, you need to have a talk about, is this going to be in our common budget? Are we buying these things together, or I'm just going to keep my Kleenex in my room because somebody else doesn't want to spend money on that? So everything that you can think of, nothing's too insignificant. I hear stories that make my toes kind of curl about university students getting Uber Eats from McDonald's for a hot fudge sundae. So instead of going there and getting the sundae for a couple bucks, it's now a $15 experience. Okay. So what's to you? What do you need to budget for? And the quickest way is to really keep track of your activities and how much you're going to have.
Tracey, I think we have just a couple minutes left. So maybe if you take one or two more questions and then we can wrap up.
Okay, perfect. How much is a good, this is Justina, how much is a good start for post-secondary? So again, it totally depends on where you're going to go to school. I would think 5 to 10,000 is minimum, probably what you're going to be thinking about, but any amount you have and any amount you can start saving, you should do. And so if you're in high school, can you babysit? Can you get a part-time job? Can you win scholarships? You do. Will your family potentially loyal to help pay for some tuition or things like that? So be really creative, and it's hard to gauge because everybody in a different situation. We also know international students, their tuition is going to be so much higher than domestic students. Thinking about that. Okay. So Anonymous says, what other funding exists outside of OSAP? Certainly there could be potentially, if your family members are working, they may have opportunities through their employer. Certainly financial institutions are going to have those products that I talked about. You would look at scholarships, bursaries, any places you can get those funds, which actually from the school or separate employers. And I'm just going to see on my list anything else that's not coming to mind. Those are the ones that you want to think about, but you want to be creative in terms of all of the sources. Get gifts for birthdays, and wherever you can reduce your expenses, that would be ideal. And the other final tip I'm going to leave you with is to just make sure you think about you. What are you interested in? What are goals you want to have in their life? Everything you want in your life, sometimes at the same time. And so if it's important to you to get education and later you want to be able to, how can you money you need to go to school, but still going to travel in the future? So your goals will be different than your friends. And so for you to make that budget through what you want and then ask questions and ask for to get you what you need. As I said, fitness is really a lifelong journey. And so you want to be getting started, grab those resources around with the 25 different ways to pay for post-secondary and the different podcast and book recommendations. Those are all that I know personally. I agree with the it's unbiased advice. Some of them are Canadian, some are US based. And so you'll see the little flags, the documents there showing you. So you'll be able to get some great resources and just and be learning and have fun. This is a really good time for you. So I know I really enjoyed all of my educational experiences and shaped who I became as I went on in life. Enjoy. Thank you so much for joining me today. I really appreciate all of you being here. If you have any other questions, feel free to reach out at info@bissettfinancialfit.com. That is also in my exhibitor booth, and you can request so you can send through a question through my exhibitor booth as well. So happy to answer them after the session, because I'm sure this has sparked your imaginations in terms of thinking about questions that you're going to have. And you're going to go on to other sessions today, and more of the pieces are going to fill in. So thank you so much.